So the thesis of this book, again, is Hindu hatred and Hindu genocide, and the sort of it is expanded from early third century, fourth century AD till 1971 Operation Searchlight in Bangladesh. Um, and so because I have so this is around a 500 page long book that covered this a broad range of topic for these around 2 millennia. Uh, and I'm going to talk about the content of this talk. So first, I'm going to define genocide, and then I'm going to discuss a little bit about the how United Nations, for example, how they have defined genocide, how um, um, so there are various elements such as physical and mental element of genocide, how they sort of play together to wipe out any race from the face of the earth. So that sort of ideologies. And then I am going to put it in the context of India to sort of demonstrate that what went on in medieval India was actually, and also in modern India, is actually a genocide. Even more than that, the Hindu genocide is still an ongoing phenomena, and I'm going to help you understand the various elements of Hindu genocides that are still active in the subcontinent. In Arthashastra, Kautilya basically gave a template of warfare and different kind of conquest, and he said that there are three kind of conquest. One is Dharma Vijay, where which is called the righteous conquest, Lobha Vijay, the covetous conquest, and Asura Vijay, the demonic conquest. So in Dharma Vijay, the conqueror would allow the defeated enemy to rule with mere acknowledgement of sovereignty. So no sort of there is the defeated king would not be killed, so to say. He will just accept the he will just give up the sovereignty of his kingdom. And then there is this Lobha Vijay, where the conqueror would take away the kingdom of the defeated king and also the wealth, but spare the enemy's life. And in Asura Vijay, the conqueror would annex the territory of the defeated king and also put the defeated king to death. Now, Asura Vijay used to be seen as the most sort of brutal form of warfare because it involved the death of the defeated king, right? But the Islamic invasion at the dawn of 8th century, it was so brutal, where not even the king, the farmers, the artisans, women, children, they were not even spared. Will Durant, who commented that the Mohammedan conquest of India is probably the bloodiest story in history. It is a discouraging tale for its evident moral that civilization is a precarious thing whose delicate complex of order and liberty, culture and peace may at any time be overthrown by the barbarians, right? So no matter how prosperous you are, no matter how civilized you are always at peril if you don't understand the ideology of the invaders, how they are seeing how they are sort of justifying their attack on you, and how they are justifying the brutal killings or genocide of a number of people, right, during warfare.
Namaste and welcome to ladies and gentlemen to our new episode of Indic Talks. Today we will discuss history of Indonesia and Hindu genocides, the forgotten and whitewashed atrocities. The purpose of this talk is to shed light on the forces behind the Hindu genocides that have been occurring in India for centuries. It further examines how these forces have evolved over time, created an ecosystem to whitewash their crimes, and how they can be defeated. Bijeet Prasantha is a theoretical particle physicist turned investment banker who has a deep interest in the history and culture of Bharat and is our speaker today to elucidate the nuances of this very subject. After obtaining his BTech from IIT Delhi, Bijeet pursued his PhD in quantum chromodynamics from Carnegie Mellon University, Pittsburgh, Currently, he is engaged in quantitative modeling of various equities and fixed income products in finance. This book is a dispassionate analysis of Bijeet's decade-long research on how Bharatiya civilization was heavily impacted by the countless genocidal invasions waged by foreign marauders and how the elements of Hindu genocide are still active in the subcontinent. I welcome you, sir, and I request you to take over from here,
Thank
please.
you. Yeah, thank you. Uh, and yes, so hi, I'm Bijeet, and so I have done well. I'm not a trained historian per se, but somehow I got interested into this topic of apparently dark topic of Hindumisia and Hindu genocides. As I started to dig more into the history of India, specifically the medieval India, after the Islamic invasion, and also how Europe got converted to Christianity, starting from the um, third century. Uh, and so as I started to dig deeper, I sort of found a overtone of genocide that dictated the expansion of these Abrahamic doctrine and ideologies in various part of India as well as Europe. And I'm in this talk I'm primarily going to talk about the evolution of these Abrahamic ideologies that led to countless genocides in various centuries, starting from 7th century, and how sort of the Ashraf, so-called the Islam and Christianity, sort of made an excess. The British and Ashraf, so to say, they made an excess in starting from the early 19th century or so to sort of wage countless number of genocides in modern India as well. So the thesis of this book again is Hindu hatred and Hindu genocide, and the sort of it is expanded from early third century, fourth century AD till 1971 Operation Searchlight in Bangladesh. Um, and so because I have this is around a 500 page long book that covered this a broad range of topic for these around 2 millennia. Uh, and I'm going to talk about about the content of this talk. So first, I'm going to define genocide, and then I'm going to discuss a little bit about the how United Nations, for example, how they have defined genocide, how um, um, so there are various elements such as physical and mental element of genocide, how they sort of play together to wipe out any race from the face of the earth. So that sort of ideologies. And then I am going to put it in the context of India to sort of demonstrate that what went on in medieval India was actually, and also in modern India, is actually a genocide. Even more than that, Hindu genocide is still an ongoing phenomena, and I'm going to help you understand the various elements of Hindu genocides that are still active in the subcontinent. Um, so I'm going to start with this fact that Hindus at the dawn of 8th century, they sort of started to experience a peculiar kind of warfare, right? Right after this invasion from Bin Qasim, right? And this sort of warfare was so total, brutal, and pervasive that the naive code of ethics that Hindus used to maintain during the warfare was sort of, it could not explain the sort of this total warfare that they were experiencing from the side of Bin Qasim, right? This is because in Arthashastra, Kautilya basically gave a template of warfare and different kind of conquest, and he said that there are three kind of conquest. One is Dharma Vijay, where which is called the righteous conquest; Lobha Vijay, the covetous conquest; conquest, and Asura Vijay, the demonic conquest. So in Dharma Vijay, the conqueror would allow the defeated enemy to rule with mere acknowledgement of sovereignty. So no sort of there is the defeated king would not be killed, so to say. He will just accept the he will just give up the sovereignty of his kingdom. And then there is this Lobha Vijay, where the conqueror would take away the kingdom of the defeated king and also the wealth, but spare the enemy's life. And in Asura Vijay, the conqueror would annex the territory of the defeated king and also put the defeated king to death. Now, Asura Vijay used to be seen as the most sort of brutal form of warfare because it involved the death of the defeated king, right? But the Islamic invasion at the dawn of 8th century, it was so brutal, where not even the king, the farmers, the artisans, women, children, they were not even spared. So because of this reason, our there was a Kashmiri Pandit called Ballav Dev. He felt the compulsion at the near the 10th century, I guess, to sort of say that, hey, Asura Vijay, although this is the most heinous form of conquest, it cannot explain what is going on in the land of Bharatvarsha. So there has to be, we need to sort of give a new kind of template to explain these kind of conquests, right? And also, I mean, um, although he felt the need to sort of give a new kind of template, um, it was his observation was basically driven by out and out amount of damage that can be inflicted during a war, and not the psyche or the doctrine that dictated these massacres, right? So obviously, behind these kind of brutal warfare, an ideology, a doctrine that was driving these demonic sort of invasions. And basically, in the following part of this lecture, I'm going to show what kind of ideology that drove the Islamic invaders to sort of commit these heinous kind of crimes, right? And not only us, actually. Before us, it started with, I think, Will Durant, who commented that the Mohammedan conquest of India is probably the bloodiest story in history. It is a discouraging tale for its evident moral that civilization is a precarious thing whose delicate complex of order and liberty, culture and peace may at any time be overthrown by the barbarians, right? So no matter how prosperous you are, no matter how civilized you are always at peril if you don't understand the ideology um, of the invaders, how they are seeing how they are sort of justifying their attack on you, and how they are justifying the brutal killings or genocide of a number of people, right, during warfare. So this is basically the introductory part. Now I am going to sort of define what genocide is in this section, right? In this coming 5 or 10 minutes. So yeah, so genocide actually was a crime without a name before World War II, right? And the word genocide, it comprises of two Greek words. One is genos, which means race, and then the Latin word side. Side means killing. Okay, so genocide actually means total or partial destruction of a whole nation or an ethnic group. The destruction is not necessarily immediate, although immediate destruction is the most imminent process when the tyrant group is in dominance, right? And this term was coined by Polish uh, Jewish jurist called Raphael Lemkin. Um, and right now I'm going to tell you the Lemkinian thought on genocide and sort of the Lemkinian definition of genocide. Um, and Raphael Lemkin basically helped United Nations General Assembly to sort of frame the Genocide Prevention Act. And there was a convention, 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, It was passed as an it defined and codified genocide as an independent crime, and in Genocide Convention, Article 1 opines that genocide is an international crime and it can happen either in a time of war or in time of peace. Um, and Article 1 further states that the contracting parties confirm that genocide, whether committed in time of peace or in time of war, is a crime under international law. Okay. And then United Nations in Article 2 identifies two important elements of a genocide. One is the mental element, so to say, the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. And then genocide also has a physical element, which includes the following five acts. First one is killing members of the group. Secondly, causing serious bodily or mental harm. Thirdly, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction. Fourthly, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. And fifthly, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So, as per this definition, conversion, so to say, conversion of children, right? Events such as that, along with killing, obviously, these are different, so to say, different fragments of and manifestations of genocide. And Article 3 of United Nations Genocide Convention Act, it says that the following acts shall be punishable. Firstly, genocide. Secondly, conspiracy to commit genocide. Thirdly, direct and public incitement to commit genocide. Fourthly, attempt to commit genocide. And fifthly, complicity in genocide. Right. So obviously, genocide will be is a perpetrating genocide is criminal act. Other than that, the conspiracy or even giving call to genocide, such as eradicating Sanatana Dharma, these kind of call, which we hear regularly in the political diaspora, even within India, those are even genocidal calls. Um, Anyway, so then briefly, I have discussed the colonizing conquests, whether it is gentrification or whether it is genocide. So we know that if we study literature, we will see that there are different sort of doctrine that goes on to justify colonization, right? Such as vacuum domicilium or the empty dwelling, which says that once someone go to a land and put some amount of his or her labor and create, let's say, some amount of wealth, so to say, establish an industry, okay, or colonize the people of that land, okay. These kind of things where by putting labor, if he or she is creating property within that land, then in a way he or she become, I mean, even though he or she is colonizing the native people dwelling on that land, it is justifiable. Okay, so I am going to quote something here. It is written by John Locke in his book Second Treatise of Government, 16 written in 1690, and he says that nobody has originally private dominion exclusive of the rest of mankind. The labor of his body and the work of his hands, whatsoever then he removes out the state that nature has provided, he has mixed his labor with and joined to it something that is his own, thereby makes it his property. Okay, so he is saying ki there is no idea as such about the about native people and native land. If you go somewhere, if you put someone some amount of labor, okay, to sort of colonize a part of the land, it is justifiable. There is another doctrine that sort of was discovered in Europe or by the Abrahamic ideologies to justify colonization. It is called savior of the soul. It says that okay, so savior of the soul emanated from the Abrahamic ideologies. According to the doctrine, it is the onus of the followers of a particular Abrahamic religion to save the soul of all human beings from the fire of eternal hell by converting them to their own Abrahamic faiths, right? So Abrahamic ideologies basically create a vertical split of humanity based on the based on believer and unbeliever of a particular ideology, and then the Abrahamic ideology sort of ordains and dictates its followers to sort of perpetrate crime on the non-believers of that specific ideology, right? And this us and them otherization, right, that eventually lead to dehumanization, is an important element to start a genocide. Third one is civilizing the natives, right? You must have heard it so many times. Ki the British came here, they sort of started railway, they civilized Indians, they gave us an nice administration, so to say. Um, and all these, because of all these reasons, the British were force of good and not force of evil. So these kind of justifications are given every now and then. To sort of justify colonizations, but these are not enough, so to say, to sort of elevate a colonizing power who perpetrated genocide on this land to the level of well-wishers of India, right? Anyway, so this is a very brief discussions that I had in my book about colonization, and whether it was a force of good or it was actually a genocidal force, right? And then in the third chapter of the book, a third section of the book, I have discussed matlab, very exhaustively how the British actually colluded with the Ashrafs, the Islamic invaders who came to India and settled here, almost 5% of the current Indian population, how the British colluded with this section of people to sort of rule the Pasmanda Muslims and the Hindus. Anyway, so then I have gone on in the second part of the book to discuss various aspects of Hindu genocides in medieval India, and I have covered various topics such as uh, so I started with genocide of Hindu dignity and spirituality, and then I have discussed the slavery of the Hindus. Thirdly, genocide in the Ganga basin and the destruction of Nalanda, destruction of Hindu educational ecosystem. Then the rampant conversion, where there was a diktat, accept Islam or die, then spit into Hindu's mouth while collecting jizya, right? Then the next point was burning of Brahmins across this subcontinent, and then exodus of Hindus, right? So these are the various aspects and policies that the Islamic invaders or the rulers adopted in medieval India to sort of kill Hindus, wipe them out of existence from this land, and then convert pretty much all the Hindus to Islam, right? So this was going on, and to sort of discuss these topics, what I have done, I have used primary references from the Islamic historians themselves to sort of illustrate my points. Okay. Uh, and I'm giving you a few examples. So in 712 AD, okay, so let me start with actually something else. So around 320 or 330 AD, it was Constantine the Great who was ruling Rome, and then he got married to some woman who was a Christian, and then Constantine the Great got converted, and once he got converted, he started to sort of recklessly destroy the pagan temples in the Roman Empire and overall in Europe. So the destruction of temples was probably an idea which was originated from Constantine the Great, um, and then as a result, Constantinople originally. So now Istanbul is a Islamic place. It's a capital of so to say an Islamic nation. Before this, it was. a Christian capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, Constantinople, right? And even before that, Constantinople was a pagan city. Okay, so Constantinople had a long history where it gradually converted from paganism to Christianity to Islam, right? Similar thing happened with Delhi, but Delhi eventually got recovered, right? By the pagans, by the Hindus. uh, but anyway, so the idea of temple destruction actually was discovered by Constantine the Great, in all probability, as much as we know from history. And then what happened? So then Islam came. So around I think 620 AD, what we call Kaaba now in Makkah. So it used to be a pagan place with 360 idols being worshipped by the by different Arabic tribes. But what happened during Islam was that all these 360 idols, murtis were removed, right, from Kaaba, and with a declaration that truth has come and falsehood must vanish. This sort of declaration was given by the Prophet himself. Um, and overall, a large number of temples were also destroyed in the same decade, actually. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you right now about the pace with which Islam expanded into Arab. Uh, just give me a second. Right. So, because idol worshipping and polytheism are considered as falsehood, Islam is duty bound to destroy them. This is the prelude to the ideology of pagan hatred, iconoclasm, and temple destruction in Islam. Driven by this ideology, the group of nomadic barbarians became an organized war machine soon after the death of the Prophet and started to destroy the native pagan civilizations one after another by killing the native Kafirs and destroying their temples of worship. Damascus fell in 635 AD, Jerusalem in 638, Egypt in 641, Armenia in 653, Persia in 654. The pace of this force of annihilation was absolutely staggering, and Islam was finally knocking the doors of Constantinople in 669 in the west. In the east, Arabian imperialism got divided into three fleets between 636 and 643 AD to invade India. One moved to Thane, another to Bharuch, and third to Debal. The result of the cultural destruction of Hindus wreaked by these radicalists and what follows thereafter makes it probably the bloodiest period in the world history, according to Will Durant. And then in 712 AD, it was Bin Qasim who invaded Sindh, and there he defeated Raja Dahir, and then in a place called Banbhor, right, in this in Sindh, he built a mosque after sort of crushing all the bones of the dead Hindus that he killed during his invasion. So the first mosque of the North Indian subcontinent, so to say, was made of Hindu bones, right? So I started with this, and then I went on in this book to sort of discuss Hindu slavery's destruction of Hindu education system, right? How jizya was used to be collected, and then how jizya was used to convert Hindus, discrimination in the administration as well, burning of Brahmins and Hindu exoduses in different time period. So after Bin Qasim, then Mahmud of Ghaznavi came. He killed something around 4 lakh people and enslaved around 2 lakh, at least. That is the count. It is definitely more than that. Why? Because this number, 2 lakh people got enslaved. This number was given by an Islamic historian for one single invasion. But Mahmud of Ghazni invaded multiple times, around 18 times, right? Then temple destruction and the persecution of Hindus by the Ghuri, Muhammad Ghuri. Then Iltutmish and the Mamluk dynasty. what they did. Then I discussed the destruction of temples by Khiljis, by Tughlaqs, and eventually I also discussed about Taimurlang and then the Mughal Empire, right? What happened at that time. So this was the brief history that I discussed. What's the time?
So we still have time.
Okay. So this is what happened in medieval India. And then Shivaji came, right, and there was a resurgence of Marathas and Rajputs as well as the Sikhs. And when this Hindu resurgence happened, the Mughal basically lost their empire, right? They got confined to pretty much from Delhi to Palam, right? It became, I think, 5 or 10 kilometer in length. I mean, Mughal Empire really shrunk to that much. In at least, I mean, in the land, right? And it happened soon after Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb, there's a thing called the Deccan Trap, in which Aurangzeb was pretty much stuck. He died in the Deccan. He could not come back to Delhi, and soon after the demise of Aurangzeb, there was a huge sort of instability created within the Mughal Empire, due to which and due to multiple invasions by Marathas as well as attacks by Sikhs and Rajputs in Rajasthan. So the Mughal Empire pretty much imploded. But what happened when right after the sort of extinction of Mughal Empire, um, it was the Ashrafs of India. Ashraf mean the ruling class of the Muslims who basically came from outside India and settled here. They had this fear that the Pashmanda class of India, the Desi converted Muslims, they will again do quote unquote homecoming or ghar wapsi. They will become Hindus again. And so, with this fear, with this phobia, they started to utilize Sufism to first of all create hateful Islamic literature, to start to control the Pasmanda Muslims, so that they they sort of abandon any trace of Hindu practices that they used to do during the Mughals. Um, and then they also, with the help of Sufism, they started different um, secessionist movements, right? So all these things created a vertical split between the Hindus as well as and the Muslims, right? It basically created a huge split in the society. Um, and it was in 1857 during the Sepoy Mutiny. What happened was that it was jointly started by all Indians, independent of any religion, class, or anything else. But then it was the Ashrafs who tried to use this Sepoy mutiny to re-establish the Mughal Sultanate in Delhi. And with this ambition, they started to loot, plunder, kill Hindus. They started to, I mean, do atrocities on Hindu women and children. It is because of this sort of heinous mentality of these Ashrafs that Hindus started to lose their passion in perpetuating this Sepoy mutiny, and British could sort of come back and re-establish their dominance in North India. And but this sort of split between the Hindus and Muslim, it did not evade the attention of the British. So they started to promote this two nation theory with different viceroys, such as I think Lord Minto and then Lord Ripon. So these viceroys, they started to cunningly promote the two nation theory. They started to promote Ashrafs like Sayyid Ahmed Khan. And Sayyid Ahmed Khan used to give very provocative speeches openly in places like Meerut or Delhi, which would further enlarge the division between Hindus and Muslims. And then they sort of groomed people like Muhammad Ali Jinnah, or they groomed institutions like Muslim League or Aligarh universities, that eventually led to multiple genocides, and eventually do the partition of India. And basically, what I'm saying, these all are basically using the reference of primary historical accounts, right? And I am going to explain to you um, a brief history. Okay, I mean, for the Sufi part, I think you can refer to my book and the references therein. I'm going to here discuss about the policy of the British, what they noticed and what they documented about how to rule this country. Um, yeah, it's a long history. There are very yes aspect of this long history of genocide, but right now I am going to discuss a very specific history which you might not have known before or not being discussed in the mainstream academia, as well as in Indian historical discourse. Okay, so there was this guy named W. Hunter, William Wilson Hunter, who was a member of Indian civil service, who wrote extensively about contemporary administrative policies, statics, history, geography, and societies of India from 1869 to 1881. So why? So he was basically, in modern term, he was an IAS officer who wanted to understand India so that they can create the administrative policies to rule this country. And he wrote, I think, 9-volume book about India. Yes, his work was compiled and published in 9 volumes in the name of the Imperial Gazetteers of India in 1881. One of his books, written in 1871, titled The Indian Mussalmans, Are They Bound in Conscience to Rebel against the Queen? Sorry. It is an important work that talks extensively of the undercurrent of discontent within the Muslim society about the British Raj. So what happened after 1857? The British opened up a lot of positions for the Indians. So they were expecting ki Indians. So after they implemented the Macaulay education, they expected ki a lot of Indians will come forward and take part in the administration to run this country, and this way there will be a bridge between, let's say, the British Raj as well and the Indian populace. So there will be a sort of class of babus who will be created within Indian administration, who can sort of bridge the gap between the ruler and the ruled, right? The Indian and the British. But what happened was that Hindus started to over dominate the positions. So um, it is found that the ratio of Hindus to Muslims in important positions in different offices um, became reduced to 7 is to 1. In 1869, the number of law offices of the crown was 6 to 4 Englishmen, 2 Hindus, and 0 Muslims. Among the offices of High Court, 7 Hindus and 0 Muslim. Among the barrister at law were 3 Hindus and 0 Muslim. Among the attorneys, proctors, and solicitors in High Court, 27 Hindus and 0 Muslim. Among the graduate in medicines, there were 3 Hindus, 1 Englishman, and 0 Muslim. Among the Bachelor of Medicine, there were 10 Hindus and 1 Englishman, no Muslim. In licentiates of medicine, there were 98 Hindus, 5 Englishmen, and 1 Muslim. Medicine were not considered as a noble profession according to Islam, and there were social prejudices about it. So you can see in different offices, right? Hindus became over dominant, and either there were no Muslim in those offices, or there were 1 or 2 Muslims. So after observing this, right, the British needed to sort of reverse this trend. They did not want to give, like, out of pagan hatred that Christianity have, they did not want to give the pretty much all the positions to Hindus. And now I'm going to quote this guy W. Hunter about how he's justifying that Hindus do not deserve this much respect within British Empire. So he's writing, quote, "The truth is that our system of public instruction, which has awakened the Hindus from the sleep of centuries and quickened their inert masses with some of the noble impulses of a nation, is opposed to the tradition, unsuited to the requirements, and hateful to the religion of Muslims." Right? Um, and he goes on to say things like, um, yeah, he further comments that is it that the Hindus have all along been better men than Muslims and only required a fair field in order to outstrip them in the race? Or is it that the Muslims have so many careers open to them in non official life that they are indifferent to government employment and leave the Hindus to walk over the course? The Hindu has unquestionably a higher order of intellect, but an universal and immeasurable superiority on the part of Hindus, such as would be required to explain their monopoly of official preferment, is unknown at the present day and is in direct contradiction to their past history. The truth is that when the country passed under our rule, the Muslims were the superior race and superior not only in the stoutness of heart and strength of arm, but in power of political organization and in the science of practical government. So they are saying Muslims are superior race, and hence these kind of dominance of Hindus in in public positions is unjustifiable. Okay, so this is the attitude of British to the Hindus, and why they are doing that. So, because they identified three shortcomings in Hindu society: Hindus do not have political unity, Hindus are not brave and wise enough in their political demands, and Hindus do not have practical sorry knowledge of how to govern a country. Right. So they opined that talent, passion, knowledge, and dedication were not good enough criteria to secure a government job. Because the reason was that it would lead to a scenario where the timid and docile Hindus will dominate in almost all the government job sectors, and the potential nuisance makers would lag behind in competition. So British are basically saying here that it is the Muslim community who are the greatest nuisance maker who will come to street with their political demand. Let me drink some water. Hence, we cannot give all the jobs to Hindus because it will create a political unrest within the country because Muslims will be agitated and they will come to street and that will create turmoil in the British Raj, right? So pretty much because Muslim have the capacity to sort of damage a nation, right? Create chaos in the street. I mean, pretty much the same rationale that current Indian government or Indian judiciary gives um, to justify the crimes of the sort of racial crimes, right? Crime at a bigger at a race level by the Muslims. The similar sort of argument was being given by the British at that time. Okay, so as a result, what they did, they created people like Sayyid Ahmed Khan, um, who were pretty much British. I mean, loyal to the British Raj. The British further did a couple of more things, like they somehow got some fatwa from some Arabic scholars saying that India is not a Darul Harb. It means it is not a house of war or the house of Kafirs, but India is a Darul Aman, the house of peace. Why? Because India right now is being run at the British time is being run by the British Raj, and British Raj are Christians. They are people of the book. Hence, India is a house of peace and not a house of war. So these sort of things British were doing to sort of appease the Muslims, take them to their side, so that they can rule the majority Hindus, right? And then at the time they created institutions like Congress, and Congress were pretty much it comprises of Desi Babus, the Brown Sahibs. It was a docile organization, right? And then they got a nice Zimmi guy like Mohandas Gandhi, who, without much thinking, joined the Ali brothers to in their Khilafat movement to establish Khilafat or Khalifa Raj in India, right? So the near 19, around 1920, the Indian Muslim Society, they started this Khilafat movement, um, and their idea was to sort of um, evict the British, uh, so that they can establish the rule of the Khalifa of the Ottoman Empire in Turkey, and so that the sort of Khilafat can be established within India, right? And then Mahatma Gandhi, without giving much thought about Hindu interest, because he was basically a Zimmi or a Dhimmi guy, he joined this movement. And because he joined, so this way, Congress started their history of Muslim appeasement, um, which is still going on in the policy of Congress and overall in the policy of this Indian state as well. And I mean, this meek surrender of Mohandas Gandhi did not establish Hindu Muslim or harmony. It rather created a situation of coming days that eventually led to partition, right? And it also led to a number of genocides like Mopla genocide in Malabar, then Direct Action Day, then the Great Calcutta killings, the partition genocide on both the sides of India, on the Punjab as well as in the Bengal side. Then the constant, persecution of Hindus and genocide that led to 1971 Operation Searchlight, the rape genocide of Hindu women in Bangladesh, and the number was around 10 lakh. Officially, it was 5 lakh, out of which officially 2 lakh women got pregnant. It was sort of a disaster for Bengal, um, and overall for India as well. So this is the brief sort of history. Starting again, as I said, it is an ongoing genocide, which means ki the genocidal elements are still active in the subcontinent. And so, in the fourth part of the book, I have done some analysis to understand what are the forces of genocide that are still active in the subcontinent. Um, and so here I have formulated different framework. One of which I want to discuss here. So I have formalized that, okay, there are six enemies: the Shoro Ripus, the Shoro Shatrus. Shoro means the six enemies within: Kam, Krodh, Mad, Lobh, Moha, Matsarya. Um, that we need to get rid of, right, in order to become a good man. Similarly, I have hypothesized that there are six enemies outside in physical world, and they are MNM, the Mufti Maulana Ashrafia class, then the missionary, the Christian missionary, are perpetually engaged in conversion. Then Macaulaism or Macloyalism, this like the British education that led to so many subversion of Hindu values. Many of them are good, but mostly they are bad. Then Macloyalism, other than that, the media of the Lutyens, um, and then the Milods, right? The Ashrafi and the missionary-minded judiciary, who are sort of um, promoting nepotism in judiciary, right? Things like that. So how many I have said? I think right. the sort of anti India ideology of Marxism, who want to break India apart into 18 different nations, and they still openly claim that. So MNM, Machiavellism, Marxism, Millards, Lutyens media, and missionary. So these are six enemies which Hindu society are right now facing. And these six enemies, the Sada Satru or Sada Ripu, they are still hellbound in destroying India, in dividing India, in converting Hindus, in subverting Hindu values, and in destroying paganism as a final mission of all their agenda. Yeah, so in the final chapter, I pretty much discussed how these different forces are at play. And finally, I have discussed what are the different, I mean, how can we sort of reverse this Hindu genocide. I have given a number of solutions which we can sort of um, work on. And this is in chapter 17.3, setting out Hindu objectives, page number 468. Here I have discussed a number of steps that Hindu society can take, such as supporting the ex-Muslim movement in India and make it a large-scale movement so that the radical elements within Indian society can be neutralized. Then engendering a Ghar Wapsi movement in India. This is of prime importance because um, the most dominant way of countering this genocide is by obviously by countering the radical thoughts, and then sort of uh, not diminishing our own number, right? One way obviously is to sort of continue the hold the sort of the population rate that we have right now. Recently, yeah, the birth rate is not it. I think for Hindus they are already below two. So there is not much replacement. So to counter that part, we need a large scale Ghar Wapsi. Then breaking up Pakistan, which is already in place. Engraving the history of Jogendranath Mandal into the heart of every Hindu, and celebrate 8th of October as the Jogen Mandal Day. So Jogen Mandal was the guy who, in the name of Dalit movement, he colluded with the Muslim League, and as a result, Muslim League swept the election in Bengal in 1946, that led to the partition of Bengal and India, right? So later, Jogen Mandal realized that the fate of Hindus in Pakistan are very, I mean, they are going to face dire consequences. And as a result, on 8th of October 1950, I guess, Jogen Mandal resigned from his. So he became a lawmaker, right? So so we need to reverse this genocide, and it did not end up well, right? Then, yeah, ex-Muslim movement in Pakistan. It is a difficult task, but nevertheless, we have to start it. Um, yeah, implementing the UCC, and abolition of the Muslim Personal Law Board, so that uh, they can't create a state within a state, right? Bringing constitutional provisions to declare medieval and modern age persecution of Hindus as Hindu genocide, the unification of education systems of Hindus and Muslim children, so that everyone learn same thing from the same classes, from the same schools. There is no need to create different madrasas or different educational institutions just because the religion is different. Okay. Pasmanda movement against the Ashrafs. See, 95% of all the Muslims in India are Pasmandas and 5% are Ashrafs. So, but the political agenda of the Muslims in India are set out by the Ashrafs, who are only 5%. This needs to change. The Gharwapsi of Bengali Muslims of Bangladesh, abolition of the Sunni Waqf Board, regime change to establish democracy in China. See, China is because China supports some sort of Marxism, and they are also anti-civilization in a way. So if we get the Chinese people inside of us, right, because both are pagan civilizations, there will be less pressure on the Indian politics as a whole to shift their political discourse to the secular side, right? That's why we need to establish democracy in China, changing the history syllabus, inclusion of temple demolition activities by the Ashrafs in view of Quran and other Islamic scriptures in the history syllabus. So the demolition of temples in the medieval India happened as part of the Islamic doctrine. So we have to bring out those Islamic the hadiths, right, and the ayats from Quran to sort of show ki these temple destruction activities were driven out of a religious zeal, right, and as ordained by the Islamic scriptures. This is important since in the Marxist historian, they are showing key temples used to be destroyed and plundered because they used to hold a lot of wealth. That is true, but there is other side of it, which is basically the clash of gods, right? We need to bring this part up, making India constitutionally Hindu Rashtra. Yeah, it is of not of very prominent agenda because if you just constitutionally make in India Hindu Rashtra, but you fail to awaken the Hindus, just legally changing the name of India to secular from secular to Hindu Rashtra, it is not going to change much. But anyway, it should be there in some part of our agenda. Reclaiming Hindu names of Indian towns and cities, and then reclaiming Bollywood. Reclaiming all destroyed Hindu temples along with Kashi, Mathura, and Ayodhya, rediscovering Hindu heritage and the continuity of science, technology, mathematics, and logic. Basically, the education system in India, it had a continuity. And if you read books like, so for example, I mean, many books were destroyed, but whatever remains, for example, Aryabhatiya, Surya Siddhanta, right, or the works of Barahmihir, it is very prominent that so they used to, for example, they used to give proofs behind their astronomy findings, right? And it was accurate up to a number of decimal points, and they used to even give error bars to their result, which are current modern scientific practice to write any article in a journal, right? So we need to bring these things up. We need to show ki we had a huge legacy, at least in astronomy, in mathematics, in inventing calculus, for example, infinite series, trigonometry, geometry, and these things. As a result, I mean, it's not like Europeans came and they taught us these things. No, these were being taught since a long time in Indian local pathshalas and in Indian local schools. Okay, and this continuity is important because once a child get a continuity, a sense of continuum in his or her sort of education, it helps the child to be able to think fundamentally and create fundamental discoveries. Okay, and furthermore, it actually makes a child much more confident about his or her culture, and to present his or her culture in the context of I mean, before the larger scientific audience. Then working towards declaration of Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar as Sanatani Rashtra's. Again, it will sort of significantly ease up the process of India to move the political sort of compass to the right side. And then finally, Congress Mukt Bharat. You see, Congress, I mean, historically was born to sort of subvert the Hindu values and to subvert the Hindu way of thinking about politics, about the progress of humanity, about decolonization, right? So I think one of the important step that we can take to sort of decolonize ourselves is to get rid of Congress from our subcontinent. Um, so these are the steps that I have sort of written down in this book. Yeah, again, it's a how many words are there? I think 1,50,000 words are there, 500 pages. So I have given here a brief overview. And yeah, please buy the book, read the book, and share it with your peers. And do write to me about what you think about this book. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It was an extremely insightful talk. I will only ask one question in the question answer session as it was pretty well covered. My only question is that now there is new Hindu hate that is being seen due to international interventions in the form of this entirely political movement, which is the Khalistani Front. So how exactly have they been able to proliferate the difference and the difference between a Sikh and a Hindu, and been successful in burying pieces of history which show that they have been joint forces in making sure that India remained a Dharmic land. So I would like you to give your insight on that.
Right. So about the yeah, so I mean it's part of the historical plan, right, by the British. So as I told you, the British basically identified whom to sort of collude with and whom to rule, and they used to because Sikhism was born out of a very chaotic political situation in India, right? And then I think Guru Hargobind came up with the parampara of Miri Piri, so called the two sword, one sword on behalf of the god and one sword to rule the earth. And that way, Sikhism effectively combined divinity with the martial attribute, right? Um, and it did not evade the attention of the British. They saw that, so they called the Sikhs as a martial race, okay, and they formed Sikh regiment, for example, to rule whom? To rule the Hindus. And so on the other side, they started to propagate that, India is the land of the Buddhas. Buddha was preaching peace, so Hindus must remain peaceful and things like that. So they started to make Hindus overall very docile, and they started to sort of elevate the status of Sikh as a martial race. And then they started to sort of manifest it in the literature as well. So they, I think, formed a committee to study the Sikh literature, um, and with the main objective to find out what's the difference between Sikhism and so-called Hinduism. And after 10 years of research, they could not find any. Now, then what happened? They started to subvert the Sikh literature. So they will start to say ki the Omkar in Sikhism means something else than the Hindu Omkar. They will rename Ma Chandi as someone else, things like that. And Hindus fail to understand this devious plan of the British. So they did not write much literature to counter it. It went on for a century almost. Uh, and now only we are realizing, acha, the damage has been done. Now Sikhs are not ready to sort of identify themselves as Hindus. Um, and as a result, now they are going to so if you recently, there was an interview of this guy Amrit Pal Singh, right, the Khalistani guy who got jailed, and he's basically blabbering the same thing. There is not an inch of Sikhism which is Hindu. In fact, Sikhism is close to Quran. Just imagine. Uh, so the only way to, I mean, the most prominent way, the way to counter it is by studying the Sikh literature in the context of our already Sanatan literature, and then create. I mean, just to put the truth before everyone, the history of the Sikhism before everyone, how Sikh gurus were the upasak of Shakti, right? Kali Ma, Chandi Ma, I mean, I see, in spite of everything that we hear in the media, Sikhs are overall very patriotic for the land of India. Okay. These news that you, maybe these are sort of showed out of proportion. Maybe in Canada, for political purposes, they are playing out these sort of politics. But overall, if you go to Punjab, I mean, it's not that kind of situation that the media tries to portray. We have to be a little more restrained in sort of portraying these sort of news before everyone. Um, but other than that, in spite of 100 years of effort, I don't think it has gained much momentum. That's my stand on this issue.
Thank you very much, sir. We wish to have many such talks with you. Namaste.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.